Hey everyone, hope you're doing well. Today's video is going to be all about quantizing your lead vocal and your background vocals together so that you get as tight a harmony as possible.
When I look around,
I venture to say that in modern music, 99% of the music that you're listening to that does have background vocals or harmonies in it has used some sort of quantizing. Quantizing is basically where we're taking the timing or the performance of an instrument or a vocal and we're snapping it onto a grid. In today's video, I'm going to show you how you can manually go in and quantize these things on a vocal, because often when we're quantizing things like MIDI instruments like keyboards and drums, it becomes a little bit automatic. You just hit the Q button on the keyboard and the computer seems to do it for you. But with vocals, you got to be a lot more careful because you can easily mess up the words that are being sung. So I hope you enjoyed today's video. My name is Chris Green, and I do want to start off by saying thank you so much. We've just crossed 5,000 subscribers on this channel. It's quite the milestone that I didn't think would be possible, certainly anytime soon, but I couldn't have done it without you reaching out. Every time you hit the like and subscribe buttons, it's the best thing you can do to support the channel. Let's jump into Presonus Studio One and let's get quantizing some vocals. All right, so here's a session of a song that we're working on called When I Look Up. This is a song that my wife is singing on. Just to give you an overview of what's going on, we've got a few MIDI instruments at the bottom. We've got acoustic guitar tracks in yellow, bass guitar in blue. At the moment, I have Superior Drummer loaded, and that's going to help us when we're seeing how important it is to quantize to the grid, because pretty much everything that Superior Drummer does is going to be locked in timing-wise. Does sound great, though. Up here in the light blue, this is what we're focusing on today. We have a lead vocal here. In fact, I'll go ahead and call this one lead vocal just so it's not confusing for everyone out there. So we have this lead vocal track that goes all the way through verse, chorus, intro, verse, chorus, and so forth. And then we have all of these harmonies. Now, the one I want to center on right here, I'm going to call this one vocal harmony 1, because this harmony is actually Lana singing words. So she's going to be matching up or sometimes echoing the lead vocal. The other harmonies are mostly doing oohs and ahs. Of course, up here at the very top, if you don't have any of these open, you have a quick option to go through and quantize based on a grid. If you've got a shaker track, like if you're using a tambourine, most of the time tambourines and shakers, they might just be sticking on a 16th note pattern, or they might be doing an 8th note or a quarter note. That would be a section where you can go up here and say, okay, I'm doing a tambourine track that's mostly playing 16th notes. I'm gonna set quantize to 16th note, bars, adaptive. Then you can go down to your, let's say that this is my tambourine track. I simply select the audio region. I've just got it clicked with the mouse or arrow tool. And then I'm just going to hit Q on the keyboard. As soon as I hit Q on the keyboard, you're going to see all these green and red blobs. All right, so now we're going to get to quantizing the lead vocal. Let's take a little bit of a listen to the entire song so you hear in context what's happening.
when I look up, the worries fade. When I look around, I feel afraid. When I look up, I see them fall. When I look around, I see prison walls. When I look up, when I look up, He will provide, and fill my cup. He's gonna fill my cup. Life feels easy, even when it's tough, When I look up, when I look up.
All right, so there you heard a lot of the lead vocal. You saw how the background vocal, the first background vocal is doing more of a word for word kind of harmony. And then you have these others that are kind of oohs and ahs, are just kind of creating sort of a palette. So let's get to quantizing. The top track, the lead vocal, I wouldn't really want to quantize this one much, but just to show you as an example of what you could do, any of the audio regions, the first thing I would do is right click and then select where it says bend marker. All this is going to do is reveal to us any sort of bend markers that are in place. So now it's kind of like we're putting on our X-ray goggles, we're putting on our Vision Pro. Now we're able to see what's happening in Quantize world. When you first select the bend markers, you're not going to see these vertical lines right away. This is just something I was working on earlier today. But when you take a look at your now what is a gray blob, I want you to hit 7 on your keyboard. When you select 7 on your keyboard, it's going to select your bend tool. So now my cursor has this pencil with a little bit of some sort of quarter note right next to it. If I zoom in right here, you can see Lana is supposed to be entering what is most likely this beat right here. So if I look at the timeline as a ruler, I've got things set to 16th note right now, but let's say I want her to come in a little bit earlier. Traditionally, you would just take your arrow tool and click and drag the track over. But if you do things that way, you're going to constantly be shifting your entire audio track with it. So obviously, if I line up this first note, now everything after it is earlier than it was supposed to be. So what we're going to do when we're selecting our bend tool, hit the 7 on the keyboard. I want to go to right before the waveforms start to happen. And when I find a section where a waveform is about to grow into something, I'm just going to click with the bend tool. What that does is it creates a bend marker. We haven't quantized anything yet, but I'm just going to go through and I'm going to find some significant portions like this one right here. I'm going to select right there because that looks like a significant area. And then this one right here, I'm actually going to select this. And then I'm going to go, well, this is an important part, and go to the end of the vocal passage or whatever phrase you're working on, place a bend marker there as well. So now I'm telling PreSonus Studio One, these bend markers are significant moments when she's singing. Now, if I have quantized set to 16th note at the moment, let's isolate this vocal. So we're just going to listen to the lead vocal as is. I want you to hear it with no quantizing at all. Then I'm going to hit the Q key on the keyboard. It's going to quantize, and we'll take a listen to see how it quantized.
When I look up, when I look up.
So obviously there's major differences. So when you hit Q on the keyboard, like I said, this is going to be a lot more automatic. This is kind of just letting the program do the work for you. I wouldn't recommend doing this with a lead vocal especially. What you can do is if you have your bend tool still selected, hit 7 on the keyboard. I can just simply at the bottom of this vertical line, this blue line, this bend marker, I can just click and drag it over to where I want it to go. As you can see, as I drag it, the more I drag it, the redder the blob is going to get. Okay. What's happening is Studio One is telling me you are squeezing the life out of this audio track.
When I look up,
I'm going to take this way back to where we started. Here was our original goal. We were looking for this little notch right here in the track. I'm going to drag it over so that as the wave starts to develop, I don't want to put it right at the beginning. I want to get a little bit of something happening there so that it sounds like she's on the beat rather than the beat happening and then the audio track following in place. So the reason I wanted you to put a bend marker at the end, so if you don't put a bend marker at the end of whatever word or phrase that you are messing with, it will actually bend everything that follows the bend marker. So if I took away this bend marker here and I took away this one at the end and I grabbed this bend marker, this vertical blue line, as soon as I start moving this one line, notice how all of the blobs behind it are now turning red. That's because now I'm messing with everything behind the bend tool. So like I did earlier, if I put a bend tool behind the phrase that I'm quantizing, now when I move this bend marker, I'm only affecting that bend marker. And you can see the third blob that I'm messing with, the third blob remains unaffected. It's still where it is. That way I can treat each word or each syllable as detailed as you want to be. Now I'm treating each of them independent of each other. So let's just mess around with a little bit of this. I don't want to go too crazy because, again, I'm kind of in the purist mindset of, you know what, Lana did a great job. I'm not wanting this to sound robotic. I probably would not go in and quantize Lana's lead vocal. But for the sake of YouTube and everyone that's paying attention, I want to show you what it could look like or sound like if you do a little bit of quantizing. So let's just take a listen to what it looks like as we have it right now.
When I look up.
Okay, so that is our quantized version. Let's listen to it in context of the rest of the track.
When I look up.
That is right on the grid. So also, my commentary to this, take it or leave it, but I think that sounds as transparent as it could possibly be. If you have a vocal, the more your vocal is off of the grid, quote unquote, the more they're struggling with rhythm or when they're supposed to come in, the more obvious it's going to be that you've had to do some adjusting along the way. So there's nothing that's going to beat singing a vocal right on the click or right in time. There's nothing that's going to beat that. But the closer and the better your vocalist is at singing on a grid or singing when they're supposed to be singing, the less your quantizing is going to be obvious. Now I want to show you with this lead vocal here. Let's bring in the background vocal. I'm going to do the exact same thing. So if I right click this background vocal right here and I select bend markers, you see I've got a bend marker here at the beginning of this background vocal. But look at this. The top blob you're looking at, this lead vocal up here, is obviously singing at a later time than the background vocal is. And in this instant, I will always make the background vocals servant or subservient to the lead vocal. So in this instance, I'm going to assume that my background vocal is wrong and my lead vocal is correct. Now, quantizing works both ways. If I'm bending this audio track, I not only have to delay when the background vocal is singing, but I can also take a section here and I can extend a passage to make it longer. So if she's holding out a word like treasure, I can make the jure part of treasure as long as I want it to be. So this is going to come into play with this background vocal. Let me add at the end of this harmony. Let me place a bend marker there. So we haven't done any quantizing just yet. Let's listen to these two together just to hear how they're working with or without each other.
When I look around.
All intents and purposes, that sounds fine. It's acceptable. But watch how close and how tight we can get this harmony just by doing a little bit of quantizing.
When I look around.
All right, let's get this around part. I'm going to move this bend tool back. Now, if you find it's holding to the grid, if it's snapping too much, hold the shift key. And when you hold the shift key, you should have the freedom to move as freely as you want. So I can take this here. I'm going to add another bend marker and really get this thing dialed in. So as you can see, that waveform up top for the word around, I believe, around is now locked in. But like I said before, we need to extend this part out because it looks like the lead vocal holds a word longer than our background vocal does. So let's click this one, drag it out. Now these two look almost symmetrical as far as their performance. Now the end of it, I want to drag this out a little bit more so that the background vocal is ending at a similar time. Okay. You can add as many as you want. Let's see how well that lines up. And of course, the beginning or the entrance. If you see in this situation, here we have two bend markers. You're going to want to make sure that you don't have any duplicate bend markers. And specifically, you never want to have two bend markers this close to each other. So I'm going to delete this first one. Simply double click whenever you're at a bend marker to remove it. So if I double click this one here, now that bend marker is gone. I can select a new bend marker. I can click and drag this one out, and that looks pretty good to me. So now just inspecting it visually, I'm looking at the screen and I'm seeing that these two look a lot tighter, but how do they sound together?
When I look around.
Okay, we have the around. You can see this blob here on the background vocal. In this situation, I'm going to be okay with removing the D, the closing consonant of the background vocal. I'm just going to take my split tool. I'm going to select this region. I'm going to hit delete. I could move the D of around on the background vocal so that it lines up with the lead vocal. But the catch is, in this instance, the lead vocal's D that's closing the word around is going to do the job for me. So even if the background vocal is singing around and we never hear that closing consonant, you're going to hear it in the lead vocal. So it's not going to be as obvious. Let's take a listen to that now.
When I look around.
Hear how that lead vocal closed off the D, but the background vocal, you feel like you're not missing it. Let's listen to those two in context with the rest of the tracks.
When I look around, I feel afraid. When I look up.
Now this one's a lot more egregious. In fact, I'm going to take this background vocal here, and I'm actually just going to use the arrow tool to shift this one back. So the arrow tool is going to be great if you just need to move an entire phrase around. If you don't need to go in and nitpick every syllable in Word, just take your arrow tool, maybe make a split at the beginning, a split at the end. But obviously this one's going to need some work. So I'm going to go to my bend tool, make sure bend marker is selected. I'm going to hit 7 on the keyboard. I'm going to place my bend markers. So I have one at the beginning of the phrase. I see a closing word right here. I see the beginning of a consonant, this little blob right here. Those are important, S's, T's, all that kind of stuff. But I can see that this one right here is a lot closer to the blob. So I'm going to make another bend marker there. And then obviously the ending of it needs to be pulled back. I've got my bend markers in place. Now I can bend things where I need them to go. I'm going to move the background vocal. I'm going to shift it back just a little bit. I'm going to go to the end of this phrase. I'm going to extend this out as far as I can, hoping that that sounds natural. I'm going to move this section over, and then this last blob needs to be much earlier. And let's see where we end. We also need this to be extended. Now this one had a lot more manipulation than the other one, but now visually we're looking at it. I see a lot of pink. We did a lot more bending, but let's take a listen to them together.
When I look up. When I look up.
Let's listen to that in context of the mix.
When I look up, I see them fall. When I look around.
All right, this will be the last instance of it. I think you're getting the point of it by now, but this one, she's singing on the lead vocal, when I look around, and the background vocal is I look around. So be careful of that. So I don't want to line this one up perfectly with the beginning. I actually want this to be further back because the background vocal should only be singing I look around. So I'm going to get my bend markers in place. That looks pretty good. I'm going to take this and bend it. And I believe that that is the section. So I can see this blob here and this blob here look very similar. I'm going to move this one out and then move this one, tuck it in, and make sure the endings line up as close as we can get it. Let's take a listen to that.
When I look around. When I look around.
Okay, we have another instance of she's saying the word around, and I don't want the background vocal to have the last word. So I'm going to go right where the D is closing on the lead vocal. I'm just going to make a simple fade out. So that one's nice and tucked in.
When I look around,
Let's listen to it in context of the mix.
When I look around, I see prison walls.
Very good. So that's your lead vocal and background vocal. Of course, when it comes to quantizing vocals, the big thing I want you to take away from this video is that if you are inclined to hit the Q key on the keyboard, just know that you're letting the machine do the quantizing for you, and it's not always going to be the most accurate thing. So either way, you're gonna be better off if you're just quantizing a lead vocal and a couple of background vocals. It certainly is worth taking the time going through and manually adding in your bend markers and then shifting things into place. Of course, if you imagine this being splayed out to 8 or 12 background vocals, you can definitely get a really tight performance. Hope you enjoyed today's video. For more tips and tutorials when it comes to PreSonus Studio One mixing and recording in a home studio environment, I hope you'll consider hitting the like and subscribe buttons, and I'll see you at the next video. Thanks for watching.